need some kind of visual on screen to cue you visually that there's an edit at that point that needs to happen. Like if I hold up the Buffy record in front of the camera, that gives you something to scrub through and look for. And like, oh, there's an edit point.
I'm doing it with the clap at the moment.
Well, that's the intro. But I'm saying if we ever need to edit something in the middle.
Oh, okay.
We could have some kind of like visual cue, or I could even just cover my camera. And if you see a hand in front of the camera for a period of time, you know, like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we typically don't, but yeah, if we needed to. Yeah. For a while, I did experiment with putting the trailers in.
And then you got a small taste of like getting flagged and what a pain in the tuchus that is.
The funny thing about that was it wasn't for the trailer; it was because of the song that was in it. It was the Grease song.
Yeah, well, my mic is still hot. The audio recognition software works a lot better than visual recognition scanners do right now. Mm-hmm. You know, it's very easy to identify a waveform, and if it's quieter or louder or quieter, it always looks the same. But because of the way video compression works, images can get distorted and, you know, compressed or blurry or fuzzy or drop frames or whatever it may be.
Or you can screw with it so it doesn't get picked up. I've seen people do that. Like they screw with the image a little bit.
I actually used to do.
Why bother?
There were episode guides on the channel in the first season or two that had flipped images in them because I was dealing with copyright scanners and I was just searching around Google and looking for the information about how do you avoid doing that or what do you do or whatever. And the answer is at this point is just, especially with the cubicle farms of people that just sit there and scan and all of that. But anyway, Jack, that was a terrible trip.
Weird cold open, hello, friends. Welcome to Podcast of the Nerds. My name is Jack.
I'm Ian. Jack, what are we doing today?
Well, Ian, today on the Pop Podcast...
Smooth as butter.
We're so good at this.
For anyone listening, Ian, we've been talking about switching host roles every other episode, and Midnight Mass is kind of Jack's baby, so we thought, all right, Jack hosts.
Well, here's the thing. Your line, I was waiting for you to deliver your line there.
Yeah,
what was I supposed to do?
Roll with the punches, baby. You got to improv. I didn't have the card open. Your partner was sucking.
You didn't have the card open.
No, I was just talking.
Okay, well, today on Podcast of the Nerds, we're going to have a little chat about what we've been up to, as usual, and then we're going to delve into one of my favorite pieces of art, Midnight Mass. Then we're going to finish up with what is really, really the last reading of Here Is Gone by Terri Botta. This time it is actually the last one. Possibly the last reading ever. Possibly. We talked about that, but didn't really finish that conversation.
No, because we were tired.
Yeah.
But, I think that the one of the big takeaways of the season 2 of the podcast, which is what we've been calling this new foray, is it's an experiment. We are experimenting. And at the moment, the podcast had several forms originally. It was me seeing if I could speak off the cuff and improvisationally for 10 minutes. And then at that point, I started doing the fanfic readings. And then you came on and the podcast became something different. And then even during our run together, the podcast became something different. And now here in season 2, we have a new idea that we're playing around with and trying to have more of a, I wouldn't call it structured because there is a structure, but I tend to ignore it.
Yeah, that's the thing. We always have a plan and we go into an episode and it ends up playing out differently than we plan.
Well, I mean, and that's, I think, the ideal way for it to happen. What we do is we create a structure that is a parachute if we need it. But if you don't need it, then I'd rather just sit here and have a conversation with my friend.
Exactly. We found that our favorite episodes are always ones where we sort of go with the flow and we sort of let it go where it goes. But yeah, we always have something to fall back on if need be. Well, I can speak for myself. Those are my favorite episodes.
Yeah. My mic still appears to be hot. Let me turn it down.
You're hot.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it down at the source. You're going to audio balance all of this anyway.
I am.
Yeah, so with the new structure, so for instance, we were talking about, and this is as good a time as any to kind of run through some of the considerations that we're working on. For instance, we thought it would be more fun to sort of, if one of us comes to the podcast with something to talk about or something we want to talk about or something personal, I'm all for it. I don't want to cut that kind of thing. But the structure, the parachute in this case, was to have the sort of list of things we've been meaning to try or things we've been wanting to talk about or things we've been meaning to read or listen to or whatever, and then to sort of dive into those. Now we're running into well, how do we do that exactly? And for instance, Midnight Mass is only 7 episodes.
Yes. And so it's easy to get through, but God help us if we get to something that's like 22 episodes a season.
It should be easy to get through, but we don't want to do another... I don't want to do another 3-hour review. So do we do this in 2 parts? Do we talk about every single episode? Do we do a big, broad, general review? I think we talked about big, broad worked well for Stranger Things. But there's so many intricate details in Midnight Mass that you and I both love.
Well, that's the thing. We were supposed to record this yesterday, but we sat down and started piecing it together, and then it got really late, and we still had like an hour left of scripting to do, and then we were like, well, this isn't going to work.
This isn't going to work. Yeah, so the takeaway of it is today's discussion may be a long one.
Yes, and probably is going to be a long one.
Yeah, we've decided that if it's going to go over 2 hours, then this discussion will be released in 2 different parts, a part 1 and a part 2. And but God help us when we do season 1 of Supernatural. Because I don't want to do an episode by episode dissection of everything. I don't want to spend 7 episodes on Midnight Mass.
And there's no point to that either. That would make sense if we were doing something that was like purely episodic, but that's not television today.
Well,
television doesn't really do that anymore.
Lonnie does a wonderful job with The Sandman and episode for each of the MCU movies, and she did Buffy episode by episode. But that's a huge investment, and we're going to be sort of bouncing around different topics. So anyway, the long and the short of it is work in progress is all we're saying. And in that format, I don't know where the fanfic reading fits, because this show now is about you and I, and the fanfic reading was a personal performance kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was also a bit of a buffer for you as well.
And we're not specifically a Buffy podcast, so we'll see where things go. But Jack, what have you been up to this week? Or news? News. Tell me the news.
News. Well, what's the news? What's the good news, my brother? No, wait, that's a different. Okay. So Ian, I've been trying to find somewhere to move. I want to get out of.
I want you to get out of that place too.
I've been here 12 years, and it's now sucking the life out of me for lots of reasons that I'm not going to go into. But if you've been watching us for a while, you already know some of them.
Yeah.
But I've been spending hours and hours and hours looking through real estate websites for rentals and whatnot. To no avail. It seems like every listing within my price range is either too small or it's up a flight of stairs, and as a wheelchair user, that's not very ideal. But yeah, I'll push on. Pardon the pun, but it's just becoming very frustrating and disheartening. Yeah. In other news, though, I've joined the Melbourne Horror Film Society.
What's that?
That's kind of what it says. It says on the tin, really.
It's a society. It's like a movie club.
It's a movie club of horror fans, all organized by four lovely people. Adam, David, Mel, and just a few other really, really lovely people. And we get together twice a month and watch a horror movie.
I think I'm going to request that we rename our Friday movie night the International Film Festival Society.
I'm freaking done. I'm tapping a gavel. It is done.
I'm just saying that's quite the name, but go ahead.
Yeah. During the pandemic, like everybody, I became very isolated. And not only that, I sort of became a little complacent, and I became a little just used to being by myself and not doing anything. And that's
I think that was a infection that a lot of us caught during the thing. So I'm happy to hear you getting out.
Yeah, and even though it becomes sort of comfortable after a while, it's still mentally unhealthy. So I heard about this society through a friend, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to stretch my social legs a little bit and go and meet these people and hang out. And dude, it's been great. It's been really, really fun. The last screening we watched a really cheesy slasher from the 80s called Maniac Cop, which is exactly what it sounds. It sounds like there's this killer cop going around, and it's not a good film, but it is hilarious and it is over the top.
Maniac Cop was actually in my Thin Dead Line original script because it was potentially one of the inspirations for the Zombie Cop episode of Angel.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I remember that now.
That episode has kind of a 90s grindhouse horror film feel to it, with Angel backspin kicking a cop's head off. Top that.
Well, there's lots of scenes like that in the film, just lots of like over the top gory shit that just is stupid but also amazing. But for the most part, horror movie fans are like metalheads in that those on the outside wouldn't necessarily expect it, but they tend to be very loving and kind people. And I rocked up alone for my first screening, and I was kind of nervous. I didn't know anyone there, but everybody was so nice.
Why do I feel like I'm hearing about my boy's first day of school?
That's what it felt like. But instead of sitting in the corner by myself eating a sandwich, I had a pint of beer and I was talking to people and we were nerding out about horror films and stuff. It was really, really fun, and I'm really glad I did it. And
when's the next one?
Yeah. So the next one is towards the end of the month. I think last Saturday of the month, I think. So in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited. I think we're watching Demons, an Italian film it's an old Italian film called Demons.
I've heard of Demons, yeah.
I've
only because I watch
it,
Red
but
Letter
I haven't
Media
seen
stuff.
it. Ah, yeah, okay. Well, Ian, enough about me. How are you? What have you been up to?
I miss my beard. So
Me
there's
too.
how dare you? You're supposed to lie to me and be like, no, buddy, you look handsome. Don't worry about it.
We already had this conversation.
Let's just turn the bokeh on your camera up. So I took a trip to California. My dad needed some support, and it was. I'm not going to get into it. It was a very tough trip, very challenging, and it was sort of confronting. My dad's 75, and it's a lot, right? So,
yeah, it is.
Lonnie
Putting
and I,
it lightly.
Lonnie and I were playing a game one time where we were sort of teasing each other by making fun of each other with some of each other's best qualities, as though they were terrible.
I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, and And I was like, and she says to me, like, I teased her with her best quality, and she teased me by saying, like, I'm Ian. Life is miserable and full of suffering, but it's okay because it's making me a better person. Blah.
Perfect. Nail
And
on
it's
the
so
head.
spot on to, my, like, I mean, we're going to get into this a little bit with Midnight Mass, but, like, partly there's this constant sense of existential dread that I deal with when I'm not working, when I'm not making things, when I'm not creative, when I'm not with my friends, so on and so forth. And, reconnecting with my dad, and he's 75 and not doing well, and all of that was a lot. And he was living in a certain state of being, and there were other factors to the situation that made it more grueling, and it was physically exhausting, and it beat me up, and I lost 6 or 7 pounds in 2 weeks while I was there.
That's a lot in 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, this started with the beard because Lonnie read that COVID can just hang out in a beard. The moisture attaches to the beard. The beard keeps it from drying out. So she asked me to shave the beard when I left. And the thing about
I did that at the beginning of the pandemic. I shaved the whole thing off.
Yeah, the thing about that you are well aware the stages of beard growth, right?
Oh yeah, as someone whose facial hair grows really, really slowly, I'm painfully aware.
Mine grows quickly, and
I know.
Still,
look at that.
You're clean shaven, and then it looks like, you've had a couple of days, but you're fine. Boy. And then you kind of look like you're on a bender, and then you look like it's like, boy, he's really letting himself go. And then you have your like under a bridge drinking cough syrup phase of beard regrowth, which is kind of where I feel like I am right now. And in a couple of days, people start going, oh, he looks distinguished.
It doesn't take long. Well, it takes me ages.
It doesn't take me that long. But I got back. The weird thing about all of this is sort of dealing with my dad's state and the move and all the physical exhaustion and all of that. The whole time in my head, I'm thinking, and then I get home and get to write about Reprise and the body.
Hey, can I just quickly say, though, what you have on your face there at the moment, that'd take me like 6 months. For you, it's been like 2 weeks. Like, screw you.
10 days. Yeah.
10. There you go. Not even two weeks.
Since I shaved and got on the plane. But I'm back.
Welcome back.
I started working on Reprise a couple of days ago. I have I think I have a good take. It's something that if you've I've covered Reprise and Epiphany in other ways, not with episode guides on the channel, but with the Comic-Con talks and the top 10 lists. And some of that's going to be in the new stuff. So I'm trying to figure out a way of sort of acknowledging, like, if you're a longtime fan of the channel, then you may have heard some of this, but like, it's the perspective that I have on these stories.
Of course. Yeah.
So diving into it, and then of course there's just a lot of physical recovery and catching up and mental stir that needs to settle a little bit. And then, Jack, I got in the mail something I reserved more than a year ago.
Oh, dun dun dun!
My Steam Deck. Now there's two types of Ian decisions.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
There's a boat decision.
Yes. And then there's a Steam Deck.
And there's a pirate budget decision. Right?
Right.
I think I managed to avoid making the Steam Deck either of those. It's a lot of times I lie to myself or rationalize to myself a thing I want to get the thing. Like, Jack, the iPad Pro. I mean, it's a Pro, so I'll be able to write on it, and I'll video edit, and I'm going to do all my work on it, and all of this. And then there's a very sobering, the first week of any new gadget is like just enjoying the lust, and then the shine starts to wear off, and you go, I can't do that with an iPad Pro.
Well, see, I was a little concerned because in the weeks leading up to you getting the Steam Deck, we were having those same conversations.
Sure.
So I could do this, I could do,
but it was
do that.
But it was different. It was different because in my head, but I've been through this enough times with stuff that I said, this is a toy. This is a tinker toy. I'm buying this to have fun and to tinker with. It's a Linux machine. I've never messed around with Linux. I love the just the tinkery nature of getting like emulators running on it and then getting other operating systems running on it and all of that. Like, I just love the puzzle of technology and troubleshooting and all of that. And I said, and when we had that conversation, I was like, yeah, I want to edit an episode guide on it. Not because it's a good idea.
That's the thing that had me concerned, because
Right.
I'm still not convinced you can do that.
Yeah,
I'm really not.
But that's why I want to do it. Is just to do
just
it.
to see.
It's
exactly
unreasonable and stupid.
And really.
And that's why I want to do it.
But that's also why you bought it. You didn't need it, but you you wanted to, and you could, so you did it.
But I was honest with myself about not needing it, and so I feel comfortable. I feel like at 42 years old, I'm finally maturing slightly.
Because didn't you say that you bought the Tab S7 Plus and then you returned it after like a week?
No. So I had I'm kind of embarrassed talking about all the tech that I've churned through. I had the Google tablet was, the Google Nexus tablet, I think it was, and then I had then I had and I broke the Google tab. The other thing is I am vicious with my tech. If there is the thing about, like being a klutzy ADD type is you really have to come to grips with sort of the serenity prayer when it comes to all the things you confront with it, right?
Right.
Except the things I can't change and the wisdom to know the difference, right? And for me, damage contracts and insurance on devices and all of that exist for a reason. And for 30 years of owning things and dropping them and cracking screens and doing all of this, I went through intense periods of just self-hatred and frustration. Oh, why can't I do that changed none of it, right? It didn't change a thing about the problem itself, which is that I am a giant, I am very forgetful, and I'm very klutzy. So I've just come to accept that I'm going to break things, and I need to get the protection waivers on them, and I need to get the, Apple Care and all of that. Or I don't buy it because, and with the Steam Deck, for instance, all of the parts to for the Steam Deck are available on iFixit. So if I break the screen, there's no insurance on it. There's no Apple Care.
Yeah.
If I break the screen, though, I order another one off of iFixit, and I fix it. I love fixing technology. And that's actually a fun part of it to me, is the idea of opening it up and taking it apart and, doing all of that. So anyway, that was a lot of talk about Steam Deck and technology. Yeah.
I never get insurance on my stuff, mostly because it's an extra fee. I don't want to pay. I've already paid a lot for the device itself, but that's also a good reason to get insurance, I know. But weirdly, I'm pretty careful with my tech because I know if I break them, they're gonna be impossible to fix. Or,
awful.
And you know what? I've owned a phone continuously since I was about 14. I've never cracked a screen until a couple of months ago. My phone here was sitting on the edge of my kitchen bench, and my sister messaged me, and it vibrated and fell off the bench. I was like, oh, it's fine. I'll pick it up soon, or whatever. Like an hour later, I go there and pick up my phone, and it's cracked. And my heart sank because I'm like, I've had an unblemished record until now. I still blame my sister for it.
I had years of... See, for example... I make it a personal policy to try and say yes anytime my friends ask me for a favor, right? Because rides to the airport,
Yeah.
Moving, yes. It is my policy to default to yes under those kinds of things. But I've learned that I have to warn my friends. I say, okay, I will definitely help you move. But you need to accept that there's like a 65% chance that an item of yours is going to be broken as a result of it. And if that trade-off is worth it to you, then I'm all there, baby. But you got to accept that. Because
I love the honesty there.
A plate, it's a a mirror, it's a something, but something, something gets Ian'd in the course of the move. And decades and decades of guilt without being able to fix the problem. It's like, it just is, it's unhealthy. Right. So I apologize. I feel it, but it's like, I just try and now externalize fixes to the problem, whether that's being upfront with, yeah, I'll definitely help you move. But you should handle all the things you love. And I will handle the boxes of toilet paper, Yeah, or to get the insurance waivers. But we should move on.
Yeah, we should.
It's good to be back.
It is good to be back once more. It's been about a month now, right? And yeah.
It's been a bit of time. So before we get into the discussion of Midnight Mass, we don't usually do this kind of thing, but Midnight Mass is a show steeped in religious ideas. The ones in the show are specifically Catholic, but I think any discussion of the show engenders a broader discussion of religion and spirituality as it is. So Jack and I wanted to lead with, he and I are both atheists, and we wanted to mention in advance that, yes, we're both deeply aware that we have many personal biases, even if we're not always clear on what they are. So in the course of the discussion, if some of our biases step on your toes, apologies.
And we have our own perspectives, and we can't remove ourselves from our perspectives. It's just, that's impossible.
Yeah.
That's disingenuous. So Ian already sort of touched on it, but this is pretty much a test of our new format here of what we're calling season 2 of Podcaster of the Nerds. And yeah, things are going to be a little experimental and whatnot, but yeah, so we're going to dive into Midnight Mass, and Midnight Mass is quite a difficult show to talk about without spoilers. However, most of the major spoilery stuff doesn't happen until the end of episode 2. So there's a lot of setup and getting to know the characters before that. So we're going to start with a non-spoiler discussion of the first two episodes. Then we will give you a very loud and very clear spoiler warning before we switch into spoilers and the rest of the show.
Yeah, I would, if I had to guess, I would guess that the version of the discussion that we're going to have today will be the exception rather than the rule for how the podcast will go. Yeah. I don't foresee us watching a lot of stuff where we want to go into as much detail as we want to with Midnight Mass. Yeah, so the Stranger Things discussion will be a little bit more common.
Yeah. It's because there's just so much going on in this show that sort of resonates with us in the way that we really want to talk about it, I guess. But anyway, saying all of that,
what is Midnight Mass, Jack?
Well, Ian, let me start by saying there are 3 TV shows that are sacred to me, for lack of a better word. 3 shows that are precious to me because they've either, they've changed my perspective on something, or they've affected me in profound ways, or they've just sort of helped me grow as a person, And those shows are, of course, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
The Good Place, and Midnight Mass. Without being the slightest bit hyperbolic, Midnight Mass really is one of my favorite pieces of art ever. But yeah, according to IMDb, Midnight Mass is the tale of a small, isolated island community whose existing divisions are amplified by the return of a disgraced young man and the arrival of a charismatic priest. But I'm not even sure that suffices as a description.
Yeah, it's interesting. The show is not... The show feels twisty, right? Mm-hmm. The show feels twisty. I was thinking about this writing about the review, or rather writing our notes for this episode. But unlike a lot of other content so I've watched this 3 times now. I watched this the first time with you, second time with Lonnie, and the third time on this trip with my dad. And I have to say my least favorite experience of it was the first time. And that is because, and I think that's unusual because a lot of times twisty content is predicated on the twist. The twist is the content, right? So the twist is, it's the reveal, the wow, it's the I see dead people, it's the whatever it is, right? And that's it becomes the most memorable part of that story or that movie or whatever. And honestly, once I got to rewatch the series without the twists, or rather knowing in advance what the twists were,
you can absorb it better, notice other things.
Into this rich tapestry of what the show was doing, the storytelling, there is a talk about allegory. There is an allegorical structure to the show that is unprecedented, so fascinating. But that first watch is you're for at least 3 or 4 episodes caught up in the twistiness. Where is this going? What's going to happen? Where is this going?
Yeah, because for me, it was very unexpected. I didn't expect it to go where it went the first time.
I didn't either.
I was sort of
easily
taken
surprised.
aback a lot. Yeah. And so I just, but I had the same experience. The second and third watches, I was more like relaxed and I was able to absorb and see more of what it was trying to do.
Yeah, but the thing of it is, so leading into this discussion, we need to respect the twistiness of it, but understand that I think that I agree with most everything that you've said, and I think that this is a show that begs for a rewatch, and the rewatch is was for me the greater experience. But we're gonna try and respect the twistiness.
Yes.
So we're gonna essentially, we believe that episodes 1 and 2 don't have our setup, that don't have a lot of content, that give away.
Not very spoilery.
They don't give away the allegory. They don't give away what's actually happening, the mystery of what's happening. And so we're going to talk about those 2 episodes as the non-spoiler part of the discussion.
Yeah. So without spoilers, for me, Midnight Mass is about people doing their best, essentially. It's about broken people trying to fix themselves. It's about lost people trying to find their way. Fix
themselves literally and figuratively.
Yes. And it's about people trying their best to do what they truly think is the right thing. They may not be right, but they think it's right, and so they do what they think is right. And it delves into concepts surrounding loss, grief, guilt, and forgiveness of both oneself and forgiveness of other people. And obviously it explores religion, but it explores it from both the religious perspective and the atheistic one, and sort of the places that both of those philosophies can lead you to.
And the feature of that is a relationship in the story between Riley and Aaron. And that's sort of the structure for those 2 perspectives. The nice thing about the show is that it feels less interested in the truth of either perspective as so much as it does what those perspectives allow for the characters, what they mean to the characters. And I think that's really beautiful. A lot of times, this could have been severely pretentious.
It also could have been really,
and it's neither.
Yes. And it could have been really anti-religion, but it's not. I don't think.
I think that I think that you could come away from it believing that it was anti-religious, but I think that there are, and I have it in my notes when we get later into the discussion. I think that there are specific points. It is maybe it's about people. It's about individuals. And what they do with their perspectives. And I don't think that is specifically about religion. One of the perspectives is a religious one, but...
Yeah. And it's also like, it's not just about religion, though, too. It explores alcoholism. It explores all these other things. And the religious aspect is almost like it's an important part of the show, but it's not all that it is, and it's certainly it's not just a backdrop, but I think there's so much more to it than that. I guess is what I'm saying.
There's the word tapestry was never more apropos.
Yeah. Exactly. I've watched it three times now, and each time I've gotten a different thing from it. But with each watch, I found a deeper love and appreciation for what it does. And I consider myself a Mike Flanagan fan after I saw Doctor Sleep and Hush and Haunting of Hill House, but it was after seeing Midnight Mass that he became one of my most favorite directors, and I might even say that he's my favorite director. As a horror fan, no one does horror quite like Mike Flanagan, and no one has done horror like him before. Not that I've seen, anyway. He juxtaposes two tones that seem to be at complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and boy, is there a particular scene in this show that you could call it the Mike Flanagan scene. I'm not going to say anything of what it is, but the juxtaposition of extreme pathos with bone-chilling horror is unlike anything I've ever seen. That is a scene I will remember for the rest of my life. And both work. That's what I mean. Like, that is the thing that is remarkable. Is they
both are incredible.
They are not dissonant. I mean, in the span of 3 seconds, the tone flips one way to the other. And they harmonize together somehow, even though you would believe that couldn't happen.
Yes. On paper, it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah.
It does.
And we'll get more specific later on.
Yeah. Mike Flanagan will scare the shit out of you, but then leave you feeling like hopeful 5 minutes later, whilst also bawling your eyes out.
Yeah. So let's we're going to start with the non-spoiler discussion of books 1 and 2. So there are 7 episodes of the show, and they are named after books of the Bible. And book 1 is called Genesis. The IMDb summary is Riley Finn returns home to family dysfunction, familiar faces, and a new priest at St. Patrick's. Elsewhere on the island, a dark storm is brewing. I've been working on my Audible auditions for book readings. And book 2 is Psalms. An unsettling omen washes ashore in the wake of a storm. Later, the locals gather for a potluck. Tragedy strikes, and a miracle occurs. And so the first 2 episodes are the slowest of burns. Other than the first scene, I would say the first 2 scenes of episode 1. The first 2 episodes, and we say slow burn deliberately. Slow burn also, I feel like a lot of times when people say slow burn, there's like a pejorative overtone or undertone to the term, but the term exists because we're not saying boring. right?
No.
So much is methodical. Like a thing doesn't have to be high action and high dialogue to be sort of entrancing, to weave a spell. And I think that the first 2 episodes, while introducing character after character after character, weave this spell of this island and this small town and all of that. But the very first scene introduces the protagonist, Riley. Riley's drunk, handcuffed at a car wreck where he has hit. Now, again, this sounds spoilery. This is the first scene first episode.
Literal first scene. Okay? Yeah.
Riley's drunk, handcuffed at a car wreck where he has hit and killed a woman. And we see in sort of a montage as he is locked up, goes to jail. The first thing his mother sends him is a Bible. Then he returns home, but periodically we see him haunted by the gaze of the woman he killed. And those sequences are him. He lays down in bed, and the camera pivots slowly, and this it's so, talk about visual storytelling. It's so well put together because as this reoccurs, you feel the dread that Riley feels of night, the next sleepless night coming. And he opens his eyes and he sees a vision of the woman he killed standing in front of him, mangled and
she has like bits of glass in her face, and
and he can't sleep.
Yeah, the one aspect I feel about that is unnecessary. Every time we get the cut to the girl, there's this like crash in the score. That I get that it's to wake you up and feel like jarring and whatnot, but I don't feel like that's necessary. I don't know. It feels like a jump scare too much.
I have a handful of what I call inconsequential complaints.
Yes, that's the thing. About it doesn't matter. Like,
right. It's so darn good that absolutely every negative thing that I will say during our discussion should be thrown out the window. That's the thing. Really. But I almost feel like it's due diligence to just mention.
Well, yeah, because I don't really have anything negative to say about the show that matters. Everything is just a nitpick. Like, but for the sake of trying to not sit in here and gush for 2 hours, like
when it comes to new TV shows, your Stranger Things, your like almost purely serialized shows, specifically in the horror genre, it feels like there is an aspect of it that is at war with itself in that it isn't episodic, but every episode of the show feels compelled to represent its horrorness, right? And in the first 2 episodes that are such slow burns, there are 1 or 2 cuts or details or what have you that feel like they purely exist to remind people this is a horror show.
Yes.
Because what it is a 7-hour movie where that builds constantly to the almost constantly to its climax. And but for the first 2 episodes, that would be, there's not a lot going on, right?
Yeah, it almost feels like a slow burn, but not necessarily what you would think of as a slow burn. It's more like, in hindsight, when I think about it, it's like, it's a bit of a slow build.
Yeah, and in the first 2 episodes, there are a handful, like 2 or 3 in total, spooky jump scares. And and you didn't need the musical stinger, which is the worst part of the jump scare.
Here's the thing. It does have jump scares, and look, as a horror fan, I don't hate jump scares. I hate cheap jump scares. I don't feel like the jump scares in this are cheap.
No, they're not birds. They're not.
No,
it's not. You think the murderer is coming around and it's the girlfriend. It's not. It's none of those.
yeah, because that's what you call the false scare, and that's cheap.
Right. Every time you're seeing something, you're seeing something.
Yes. Is it spoilery to describe one of the jump scares?
Let's not describe it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but they're not cheap. I don't think.
Yeah. And the thing is that the pivoting shot to the woman in the accident didn't need that hit. It didn't need that musical hit, because the visual is, if anything,
was enough.
I think that if there was no sound, it would be chilling. If the camera just pivoted and we see what he's looking at, you'd hold your breath.
Exactly. You sort of hit the nail on the head, because the music, the jump in the score, it's this, oh yeah, you're watching a horror, and I'm like, I already know. Like, I don't need to be told that. But again, it's a nitpick.
Yeah,
it
utterly irrelevant.
Does not matter.
Here's the thing: the first 2 episodes are beautifully shot. Zach Gilford's performance as Riley is just entrancing. He's very captivating.
And I think I want to say terrific. The whole cast. Hamish Linklater as Father Paul, absolutely incredible.
There's not a weak link.
Somebody should drive to that man's house and just give him an Emmy. I don't care about a nomination. Just give him a freaking Emmy. Like, he encapsulates that character so well. But we'll get into that. The one thing I wanted to say about Riley going to jail or prison. Ordinarily, I would be bothered by the fact that we don't spend any time with him in prison at all. We see him in the cell. We get the shot of him seeing the girl, and then it cuts to on the island. Essentially, he's I think it's 4 years later. And typically I would be bothered by that. Like, I would have want to have seen a bit of his experience in jail, but I think here I don't care, because it's so not the point.
Not the point.
Yeah. We like we already know he spent 4 years in jail, and jail sucks. That's
and to be clear, the accident, the jail sequence, and him returning home is the first 5 minutes of the episode.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Yeah,
5 minutes. It doesn't waste any time. It doesn't drag its feet there.
So
at all.
Return to the small town. Aaron, Riley's old flame, is now pregnant. Who the father is, we never get to see. We meet Anne, Riley's mom, Bev, the town.
Annie, Riley's mom,
Bev, the town.
Crazy religious lady, I guess. We've talked about this before, Ian. She's basically the crazy religious lady from, is it The Mist or The Fog? I think it's The Mist.
Yeah, I'll get into that. That's one of my, talk about my handful of inconsequential complaints. Bev is one of my handful, which I will get into. But,
same, but we'll get into it.
So as for the first 2 books, definitely a slow burn, but personally, I mean, wherever you sort of end up falling, I have a very special fondness for, call them small and sweet, if vaguely backward, community stories. Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, my hometown. Garrison Keillor, they're very prominent in Stephen King stories. It's always a small town where something strange starts to happen, and the poster for this looks very Stephen King-y. Bev is a very Stephen King-y character. And I think this is better than, I'd have to do a side-by-side comparison. This is deeper and more meaningful than any bit of Stephen King content I can think of, beyond maybe The Shawshank Redemption, which I think is good because of Frank Darabont.
It does feel like that. It really does. And the funny thing about that is, when we see the shot in Riley's room when he first gets back, his bookshelf is lined with Stephen King books. So
there are a couple of. I think there's a reference to The Thing in there. I maybe think of Stranger Things. The X-Files is referenced in there.
He's got a picture, a movie poster of Seven. The Seven.
Seven is referenced in there. Yeah, so there's a couple of visual references. Not all of those specifically connect. But I just have a fondness for this kind of story. I love the sheriff. The sheriff is played by Rahul Kohli, who is the world's greatest Twitter follow, by the way.
Yeah, that
if
man
you
is
don't
so
mind a dirty
entertaining.
mind.
Oh yeah, he's very, very crass, but very, very entertaining. And I have some stuff to say about him in the spoiler section. His performance and whatnot.
Well, before we get there, what do you think
quickly,
of book 1 and 2?
Well, my notes didn't save in the card here, so I'm working off my raw notes.
Okay.
I don't know what happened there. I apologize. But one of the things that stood out to me in the first episode is Riley's dad, and who's played by Henry Thomas, who we know from E.T. He's the little boy in E.T. Elliot in E.T. But the way he is with Riley, he's very sort of standoffish and cold, and like there's a scene where he says goodnight, and instead of giving him a hug, he just awkwardly like shakes his hand and stuff, and that makes me feel so bad for Riley. Like, I get it though, and just the whole his dad getting weird with him in terms of him like wanting him to go into church is essentially trying to force religion on him, telling him that he should go into church.
You've never had religion forced upon you.
I mean, I live in a very secular country, so
I do not. And I very,
secular
very
or non-secular.
I very, very much identify with the experience of, specifically on this trip too.
I'm sure you would.
It's interesting. I mentioned the third time through I was watching with my dad. My dad is very religious, and I thought that was a really interesting acid test for the show and its treatment of its themes. So, this is before we send people away who haven't seen the show. My dad is very religious. He's Lutheran, reads the Bible every day, reads a different verse, different bit of the Bible every day. He's very studied. My dad is an academic and has kind of an academic approach to the Bible and the study of it. And so watching it with him, he enjoyed the show. He really enjoyed the show. We had wonderful discussions of it. And he knew every passage that was used in it. The show leverages religion very heavily in its storytelling.
Yeah.
And
I really wish that I was more academically familiar with the Bible so I could interpret the titles and how they relate to the one thing that the episodes more.
The one thing that he said is that well, I don't even want to say that because it may be a little spoilery. We'll talk about it later on. But I thought that spoke to something that devout.
I know a lot of people that have had that experience.
Yeah, enjoyed the story and its characters as well. So anything else you want to say before we go to spoilers?
Well, I also thought just that so Riley's dad he wants him to go to a church and he does, but he tells him to sit back and not take communion. And I thought, like, what's the point of him being there then? You want him there just to pay lip service?
Hear the good word. Boy, you have not grown up in.
I know, that's the thing. My mom was not religious. Religion was never put on me. Like, it's always been a thing that was just there, and I didn't have to deal with. Like,
Jack, when I was 24, I told my dad for the first time that I was an atheist, and
it's almost like coming out as gay or something.
He
like,
cried.
I don't know. Oh no. See.
And he said he told me, he said it's my fault. I should have taken you. I never got you confirmed.
That's insane to me.
It's funny to me. Like, I love that. Right. I love that I have that. How that experience of the father and son in this feels a little foreign to you, and to me it feels so specific.
That's the thing. And that's why it seems like it stood out to me more than it does you, because it's like, oh yeah, of course that had happened. But I just, like, I know a lot of Americans, and they all have said to me, yeah, if you're in America, you sort of avoid religion as a topic because it gets tense really, really quickly. And I'm like,
religion and politics.
That's not the same here. Like, I would say that, like it's almost like in America you expect people to be religious. Here it's the opposite. You expect them to not be religious unless they say that they are. Like it's
we have bubbles of secularism, but basically it's the same dividing line it's always been.
Yeah. And just one last thing. So the opening hymn at the church, they're singing a song called "Faith of Our Fathers," and I thought that was a nice little reference to what was going on with Riley and his dad.
Oh yeah. Well, before we send anyone away who hasn't watched it, the other aspect of this is a new priest comes to town. And starts holding sermons, and strange things start to happen. That's as specific as I'm going to get with it. But it is wonderful, and you should go watch it. If you ever cared about any opinion that either Jack or I had, this is one of the ones that you should care about.
It's one of those things, like, if you get Midnight Mass, you sort of get me as a person, kind of. Like it's one of those things that's very big for me. Yeah,
and if you tend to avoid horror because of violence or scariness, I get it. I personally struggle with certain types of violence very much. This is not one of those. And there are moments of punctuating violence, specifically the final episode is the most horror of all of them.
Yes.
And there is one moment of punctuating violence before that, but you can see it coming from a long ways away.
Yeah.
So I think that this, because it's so rich emotionally and thematically, I think even if you're someone who is not into horror for those reasons, this one's the exception. Cover your eyes, plug your ears. You can see the moments coming most of the time.
Yes. Yeah. Look, horror and what is scary is a very subjective thing, but even though this is a horror, the horror is not the point. So it doesn't spend too much time dwelling on it. Look, it does build suspense, and it does suspense very well, but it's not overly scary. And as Ian said, there's a couple of graphic scenes, but it's not over the top. It doesn't become a full-blown gore fest.
No.
But yeah, so I think if you don't like horror and you're sensitive to it, I get that, but I think there's so much more in this show to absorb and to get from it, so I think you should still give it a shot, because
in my mind, it's
so much more.
It's similar to saying I won't watch Buffy because I don't like horror. It's like, okay.
Actually, that's the best way to put it, really. That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, there's a handful of scary things in Buffy, but Buffy is about... The horror is the background for something else that Buffy is doing, and that's the same thing going on. But we should move on.
Yeah.
This is your spoiler warning.
Yeah.
Past this point, we're not going to hide anything.
Absolutely not. This is it. This is the spoiler warning.
Click away. Don't ruin the show for yourself. Click away.
Nope.
Jack, are they gone?
I think they're gone, Ian.
It's vampires.
It's vampires. It's vampires. A vampire.
Vampire. That so doesn't do it justice, but that's what it is.
We're skipping a whole bunch of stuff here.
Well, now we're going to chunk together episodes 3 through 5. By the end of episode 3, you learn what's going on. So new thing. Yeah. So people are aging backwards.
There's a miraculous scene where a disabled girl stands up and walks.
Yeah, and there's actually a wonderful visual tell as to hint at where Flanagan was going with this. That's in book 2. Riley's mom is wearing glasses and sewing, and she pricks her finger. I went and looked at the scene. She pricks her finger, and she sucks the dab of blood off of her finger and then looks at her finger, and it's blurry, and she takes her glasses off, and she can see. And that's like, hey, here's what's going on. They're being fed blood in the communion wine, and it's healing them. And I love that there's so many little artistic flourishes like that throughout. That
and none of it's
visual storytelling.
heavy-handed.
Yeah. It's just like, here you are. Like here you are. If are you watching? It's like a magic trick. It's so wonderfully done.
You never feel like you're being beaten over the head with subtext or metaphor. Like it's just there. It's presented. Yeah.
Yeah, and that said, since we're now into the spoiler section, again, exceptionally inconsequential complaints. I cannot help when you're making a twisty, when you're like, a twisty twist. I got a little twisty twist for your twist, right? Mm-hmm. My brain loves a puzzle, and I cannot help but sit there and try and figure out what's happening. And one of the big things in this is because everyone needs to de-age in order to tell the story, the older characters in the story have makeup to make them look older in the first couple of episodes. And it's okay. It looks a little like stage makeup to me.
There's only one that really stands out to me though, and that's Mildred, the old lady. The others are more subtle. That's because they're taking like a 25-year-old woman and turning her into like an 85-year-old.
The largest gulf to cross. But two of the characters were guest stars on one of my favorite. I don't like the term trash TV shows, but one of my favorite trash TV shows, Castle, that I have watched 100 times. I love Nathan Fillion and Stan Akatic. The mayor and Riley's mom were both guest stars on Castle, so I'm very familiar with what those actors look like normally. So, but and this is one of the reasons why I enjoyed the rewatches more than I enjoyed the first watch. Because in the rewatches, I just let all that go. My brain wasn't trying to figure out the twisty, what's the twist?
Exactly. And I picked up on things even this watch that I didn't get the last two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you watched it with me the first time. Did I guess vampires?
I don't think so.
I guessed something. There's something close.
You guessed... I think you guessed the Father Paul Monsignor Pruitt thing.
Oh yeah,
they were the same person. So we're sort of jumping ahead here, but we're assuming that you've already seen it. If you
went past, you've seen the whole show. So books 3, 4, and 5: Proverbs, Lamentations, and Gospel. 1 and 2 are slow burns. 3 is the confession episode of the father that ends with the reveal of what's going on. And 3 is a catapult.
Yes. I love the Father Paul Monsignor Pruitt reveal, the way it's constructed, how we cross between Father Paul in the confession booth, providing voiceover for the scene, and then we get the shots of those beautiful wooden carvings.
Yeah.
Depicting what he's talking about, and then we cross dissolve over to old John Pruitt in the desert. It's just a really pretty and well done scene. I love it so much.
And the monster, so he finds a cave in the desert in Israel.
He's in Jerusalem, and then he wanders out into the desert.
And there's a vampire in it who turns him so that he can leave the cave.
Yeah. And he comes out, this young man who we first believe is Father Paul.
Yeah, and a part of it is that Father Paul is suffering from dementia and believes that the vampire is an angel.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to clarify is that Mike Flanagan has said that it is just a vampire. They think it's an angel, but in the fiction of the show, it's not actually meant to be an angel. It's just they think it is.
Yeah, and the
clarification.
The cutaways to the monster are genuinely scary. The
scariest bits in the show.
Yeah, the young priest is reflecting on the story through the perspective of Father Paul's dementia, seeing it as an angel and so forth. But the way Flanagan films it, he films it cold. That it is, it's a monster. Here's what's happening. There's one shot where we see through Father Paul's eyes, and he sees a halo over the angel's head. But the rest of the time, it's clearly represented, I thought visually, that this is not an angel, it's a monster.
Yes, exactly. I think it is pretty obvious that it's not meant to be an angel, but I think it's an important clarification to make.
So the reveal is the first bit that blew my mind. It's kind of hard to project back now, but I don't think that I've ever seen the tropes is the wrong word, but sort of the mythology of Christ and the angels and all of that layered over the top of vampire horror. Every once in a while that may have happened, but I didn't see it. And every once in a while I feel like we get to come upon something that is completely new and unique. And even though this is a show loaded with sort of tropes, small town tropes and all of that, that whole tapestry is what we were describing of the body, the blood, live forever, immortality, all of that, as a double layer between religion and vampire horror was awesome. I mean, just so clever. It's so clever to stitch the two of those together in the way that he did.
Yeah. Well, I actually watched an interview with Mike Flanagan last night, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the interviewer asked him about stitching together these two things that are like in most people's minds are diametrically opposed to each other. Religion, which is often considered to be this pure thing, this like positive, happy, bright thing, and horror essentially. And Mike Flanagan was like, well, in so many ways, horror is woven into the fabric of religion. You
Scary
read
stories.
The book of you read the book of Revelations. It's all about monsters coming out of the ocean and winged creatures coming and ripping you apart. Like, there is a lot of horrific stuff that happens in the Bible. The plagues, the book of Job. Like, it's almost essential to the Bible, especially like the Old Testament. Old Testament God was a scary, vengeful, angry person.
Yeah. And so that was something I was going to bring up. So one thing my dad specifically commented on, which he's never seen a piece of fiction like this, where it was so layered with religion, with religious specific texts from the book, all of that. And he was struck by how good a job they did of finding verses that fit the context, and to the point where they felt a little cherry-picked to sort of represent, but that also plays into the theme of evangelism and manipulation of the religious leader, which we'll get into later on. But yeah, it is so dense with, he's obviously studied. Flanagan is obviously steeped and studied in they Catholic
clearly know
text
what they were
for
talking
this
about.
storytelling, and finds wonderful ways of stitching the way in which a priest like this might misinterpret what's happening as an act
and
of
it's
God.
Believable.
Yeah.
And you can even as an atheist, I could totally understand why they were buying it. Like, absolutely. We get the first quote unquote miracle in that a paralyzed girl stands up. The Joe and Lisa thing. Sorry, I'm getting muddled here.
Yeah, it's okay. This is a tough discussion.
Yeah, it is. So, there was another character by the name of Joe Coley, who is an alcoholic, and sometime in the past, he was messing around with the gun. The gun went off and hit this teenage girl in the spine, and she became paralyzed. And then through drinking the blood of the vampire, unknowingly drinking the blood of the vampire, there's this really awkward scene where they're in mass, and Father Paul, I think they're doing a communion thing, the thing with the crowd.
They're wonderfully awkward. It's not this.
Yes.
It's not this theatrically.
Yeah.
Whatever. It is.
No.
Chunky and him forcing the situation on.
Genuinely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He's standing there with the cracker, then he's like, come on, like stand up. Essentially takes a step back, and she wheels forward, and he's like, nope, and he walks up a couple of steps. And everybody's like understandably like horrified.
How
like, what
dare
are you
you
doing?
Yeah,
like what are you doing? And then she stands up and walks up the steps and takes the cracker. And as a disabled person, that really like reminded me, I've had religious people approach me and do their whole, in the name of Jesus you are healed, like all this really crazy stuff. I had this drunk woman in a bar once just going like, stand up, you can do it, God said you can, stand up. I'm like, the moral of the story is don't be weird to disabled people. Leave us alone, okay? That's a
good lesson.
Yeah, but that scene is so awkward and so crazy, and but then
go ahead.
And then later on we get this scene where Lisa, the girl who was paralyzed and is now walking, she goes to Joe Colley's house, and we get, for me, what is one of the most powerful scenes in the series. And I want to give a proper mention to Inara Simone, who plays Lisa, and Robert Longstreet, who plays Joe. Don't get me wrong, the dialogue and the writing in the scene is top tier, but the performances really, really carry it. She goes to his house, and she starts off by saying how she hates him. I think she specifically says it. He reached through time and stole her future. Yeah. And then, but she says, "I forgive you, Joe Colley." And she said, the only thing that was standing in my way was hatred, but the only thing that's standing in your way is yourself, because he's a full-blown alcoholic. He's he's ruining his life through alcohol. And but their dynamic to me is one of the most interesting in the show, because like I genuinely feel for both of them, because I understand where both of them are coming from. Like Joe's drunken stray bullet paralyzed Lisa, and like she says in the scene, he stole from her, and I don't think anyone in their right mind can blame her for hating Joe. Of course she would. Absolutely, of course. But then on the other side, there is Joe, and I feel for him and how tragic of the character he is, because he's consumed by his guilt, and he's so far down inside of it that he's basically drinking himself to death. And I almost feel as though he hates himself more than Lisa does, in a way. So to have Lisa forgive him, not only for his sake, but for her own sake, is so incredibly powerful to me. Yeah.
It is the scene gets me, period. Like, the scene absolutely gets me. One of the criticisms that I've heard levied against the show is that it's very monologue-y. There are a lot of monologues, but who cares? It's such a weird criticism. They don't talk real people. Stories are constructed. Romeo and Juliet don't talk like teenagers. Who cares? Is the story effective? Did you feel something? Right?
The weird thing for me is that I know people who speak in monologues, so it didn't bother me. I know people who talk like that.
Yeah. That, for some reason, there's something about that scene that sticks with me, like in a negative way, and I don't know exactly what it is. I don't subscribe to the idea that the show is too monologue-y, but there is something off for me about that sequence. I love what you had to say about it, though. That's a perspective, I think, that I don't bring to that scene specifically. And I think that their performances are terrific. I love what is written and what they has to say, and yet something about it doesn't play for me. And there's
That's
one
fair.
other
That's
one other
fair.
monologue in the story that we're going to talk about, and I know exactly why it doesn't play for me, but I don't fully understand that one.
So one of the things I wanted to say, and I sort of touched on before, so the show deals with two big themes in the show: religion and alcoholism is another big theme. And I said before that I don't see the show as an indictment of religion, because ultimately I think the show draws a similar conclusion about religion that it does as it does with alcohol. This is a little bit further ahead in the show, but in the first AA meeting, Father Paul says to Riley, alcohol isn't good or bad, not on itself, it's people. You know? A drink is just a drink. You know, we use it for ceremony, ritual, and celebration, and under the right circumstances, for most people, it can be used to enhance a mood, and for most people, it's fine in moderation. And I think the show draws the same conclusion about religion. Religion, for the most part, for people who practice, can provide comfort and purpose, and
I think that's
enhance one's life.
That's the perspective that Aaron is there to represent. Aaron is So getting into Lamentation, episode 4, Lamentation, is, I think 4 and 5 are my two favorite episodes of the show. Lamentation is a passionate expression of grief or sorrow, is what a lamentation is. And one of the consequences of de-aging is Aaron loses the baby. And this episode is where I fell in love with the show, specifically the conversation between Riley and Aaron, where they talk about, what do you believe happens after death? And she says, no, not about me, about my child, my daughter.
Yeah.
And talks about, tells this one, it's so funny. I feel the weepies just barely grazing the edge of what she said. Like, in my imagination, I haven't said anything yet, and I'm still like,
I know.
You know.
That scene, man, it's one of my most favorite scenes in all the fiction. It's gorgeous in every sense of the word.
She talks about Aaron's speech about her daughter in heaven, and she talks about how her daughter's life saved her life. Okay? So there's a wonderful dynamic, I think, being set up here. So that's one of them. But I want to read an excerpt from what Riley says, because, I mean, talk about all the artistic flourishes, the structural artistic flourishes that are in this show. He says, and the electricity disperses from this is Riley talking about what's going to happen when he dies. And the electricity disperses from my brain till it's just dead tissue, meat, oblivion, and all of the other little things that make me up, the microbes and bacterium and billion other little things that live on my eyelashes and my hair and in my mouth and on my skin and in my gut and everywhere else, they just keep on living and eating me, and I'm serving a purpose. I'm feeding life.
Right.
And Riley's arc up until this episode, he in there, I think it's the first scene between he and Aaron says, how are you doing? No, how are you doing? And he talks about how he has no purpose. His life no longer has purpose, because after he's killed a person, what does anything he do mean? How does his life have meaning after an event like that has occurred? And the idea that tied into that his death has purpose.
Right.
Is not only
it sort of makes me
incredible foreshadowing, but also speaks to his character in a way that I think is just gorgeous.
Yeah, yeah. It sort of makes me think of some religious people, and I guess some people interested in philosophy. They often ask, why are we here? Thinking that there needs to be some philosophical reason as to why we are here, the meaning of life, so to speak. But whenever people bring up that I always just think of, well, there is a reason in terms of cause and effect. Life spawned, and here we are. But a philosophical reason, I don't know. And that's sort of what Riley is sort of talking about there, sort of.
But for him to talk about, he will then have purpose in things feeding upon him. In the episode where he goes and gets eaten by the vampire,
oh yeah, holy
is
shit,
so mind-blowing structurally to me.
Yeah,
the way that sequence foreshadows how the episode ends, as he gets fed on by a parasite, by a predator,
a literal parasite,
and has purpose. And twice he uses his death, or rather, then he uses his death to save everyone.
He also finds a purpose in that. Yeah. I think that comes in the episode after. I think, but it's still
that's episode 6. But the thing I love is that
scene. But that scene follows directly after him being eaten. So
Aaron's child used its life to save Aaron. Riley uses his death to save Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is and it's all set up in that conversation between the two of them.
Yeah.
Him taking the rowboat out, which we'll get more into in a minute.
Yeah.
And using his death to convince her to save herself. And Aaron's daughter, her life convinced Aaron to save herself. It's just structurally, it just blows my mind, Jack. It's so pretty. It's so pretty.
Yeah. The writing is amazing. And the performances elevate it so much.
But before we get to the end of the episode, so they have this conversation where they talk about death and they talk about all of that, and then it cuts to something goings on with the priest. And when we cut back to Riley, he's shot in a portrait. He's laying in bed, and the camera is in a portrait perspective, the way it has been the entire time. When he is haunted by the vision of the woman he killed, and the camera opens in the portrait perspective as he's laying in bed, and he opens his eyes and sees Aaron.
Yeah, yeah.
And what that means in terms of visual storytelling, it's not heavy-handed. It's not given away. It's all the way the character is framed in two different scenes. Is so gorgeous. Like their intimacy and the relationship and her love is keeping the darkness at bay. And you don't have to say anything. It just is shown in the way the shot is framed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've been through the show three times now, as I said. And this particular watch through hit differently this time, especially that scene we were just talking about when they talk about death. I lost a friend very suddenly and very tragically these past two weeks. My friend, long story short, he had a biking accident. Was in a coma for a little while, but he had no brain activity. He was brain dead, so they had to switch off his life support. And so that scene, I mean, the past two times I saw the show, it made me weepy, but this time I bawled my freaking eyes out. Like
full on ugly cry.
I paused. I had to pause. I was, it was ugly. But it's funny how the timing worked out this time, that this show was exactly what I needed in this moment. And just again, the show is now even more special to me. Like it means more to me the more I see it. But that's something I wanted to mention. And rest in peace, Lewis.
Yeah, again, I think that the again, we're constantly talking about the Flanaganism of it, right? And we're coming up on the scene that I thought specifically encapsulated it, but the juxtaposition of extreme sentimentality, which I think has almost has a pejorative or a negative connotation, but I don't mean it that way. No. I mean this sort of rich, emotional, evocative storytelling and horror, right? And that scene with Riley talking in this intimate, beautiful conversation was really well acted. Those two did a terrific job in that scene. Talking about death and the intimacy between the two of them, and her talking about her daughter, followed by Riley getting eaten by a vampire. And yet it works, right? And yet it works.
It works, and it shouldn't work, but it does.
Right.
And I think it works because of how it is handled, and I just really feel like everybody who worked on this show did it with such a love and a passion, because it really shows.
Yeah. One event informs the other one, right? That things can be both ugly and beautiful, but those don't negate each other. Like, there is beautiful ugly, and there, and then book 5, I don't know how we break this down. Book 5, Gospel, we see what happened to Riley. He and Father Paul turns him. Riley wakes up on the floor. They have a conversation. Go ahead.
So that scene where Riley wakes up on the floor and Father Paul is standing over him, we get a shot looking up at Father Paul, and we see the vampire glow in his eyes.
Yeah.
Riley is now a vampire, and he can see it in Father Paul. I love that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
The vampire stuff is, other than the main vampires, really subtle and really interesting like that. And the two of them have a conversation. The episode is constructed in a way that's slightly more complex. I'm simplifying the construction for our discussion. The two of them have a discussion about guilt. Father Paul tells a story about a pet mouse that to reveal to Riley who he is. And
he starts it by saying, like, Riley's like, we're having a meeting, and he's like, no, this is the meeting.
Right. Father Paul lets him go. Riley goes and asks Aaron to go out on the boat. I'm grossly oversimplifying. He explains to Aaron what's happening, tells her to run, and to prove that he's telling the truth, he waits until the sun comes up. And as the sun rises over the horizon and he opens his eyes, he sees pristine and healed in front of him the girl that he hit with his car.
Yeah, so
and it is
throughout the series,
shockingly emotional, beautiful moment.
So as we said, throughout the series, he sees this girl, and she's all mangled and bloodied and bits of glass sticking in her face. And then on the boat, just as he's about to die, he closes his eyes. He sees her sitting there, and she's fine. She's beautiful. The sun's glowing on her. She reaches out, takes his hand, and they stand up. Throughout the whole series, she was a manifestation of his guilt. But in that moment on the boat, when he sees her and she's fine, that was Riley forgiving himself, and that is just, I feel it welling up inside of me right now, Ian.
I do too. And
oh god,
in
it's so beautiful,
gorgeous. I mean, this is the most memorable. This is a scene I will remember from something until I die. In this gorgeous moment that has built organically and is so well earned from his nightmares and his visions of the woman that he killed, from the opening scene of the episode to this point where he sees a vision of her healed and takes his hand. We cold cut to Aaron wailing in terror, screaming in the boat, harrowing screams in the boat as Riley's corpse burns in flames in front of her and falls to ash in the boat. It is
But
I mean, you and I sat there. You had seen it before, and you and I sat there just like,
yeah.
And you tried to say something,
like,
and I was like, hold on.
yeah. Like, it's not often I see you speechless, but you were speechless in that moment.
Speechless.
Like,
A moment that pairs those two things together, and I don't know if it should or it shouldn't work, but it works.
Yeah.
I mean, it is harrowing and gorgeous. Sorry, I'm taken up again in the.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah, no, I feel it too. It's welling up inside of me. I also love how the final meeting between Father Paul and Riley, and how that scene are stitched together, because Riley gets eaten by the vampire, and then the next we see him, he's on Aaron's doorstep, and then we do a bit of a jump back in time to the meeting, and because of that, I mean, and it's very intentionally done, but we don't really know what Riley is going.
Yeah, you don't know if he's good or bad.
Yeah. So in the boat leading up to that moment, I was terrified. I thought maybe he was going to like jump her and try and bite her or whatever. But then as soon as he says, no, I brought you here so I would have nowhere to go, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, there's a hanging question in the show that applies to vampires that also applies to religion. Like, it's another one of the parallels. And the question is, does being turned make you evil? Right? So it's different.
And Riley's dad talks about that later on.
It's different in every representation of vampires, right? In Buffy, the soul being the conscience leaves the body. So you are pure hedonism and just pure selfishness manifested, and you're an apex predator that eats people, right? So whatever evil is, that looks like evil, but I'm sure, lion's behavior looks like evil to an antelope, right?
Right, exactly.
But the stories that Buffy tells, you have to decide, like, is evil a force? Is evil a magical force that compels things from the monsters in the show or not? Or is it apex predator lion behavior? And in this show, there's a question, and the conversation between Father Paul and Riley in the church, or rather, when he's turned Riley and they have the meeting,
the final meeting,
is pretty significant. Father Paul says, "What do you think? What do you feel when you think of the car accident?" And he said, and it's revealed Riley feels guilt. And he's jealous because Father Paul doesn't feel any guilt.
Because we skipped over this, but Father Paul inadvertently kills Joe and feeds on his blood.
And Father Paul associates that with religion, but we as the audience are also left to wonder, is that being a vampire that removes guilt from your system? And then that question is left to hang when Riley goes and sees Aaron. And then in the boat, it's clear that it does not. There's a hunger as an apex predator, but it doesn't compel you to do one thing or another.
Yeah. Just skipping ahead a little bit for that, to speak on that point. There's a scene in the last episode where Riley's parents are reunited, and they've both been turned into vampires. And Ed, Riley's dad, wonderful performance by Henry Thomas, but he talks about how he thought the hunger would be uncontrollable, but that wasn't the case.
It doesn't change who you are. They have this
hunger. Yeah. And to me, that is a metaphor of sorts, again, relating to the alcoholism and substance abuse.
That relates to alcoholism.
Were you going to touch on that? Did I cut you off?
No, that relates to alcoholism, and that relates to religion as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. You might feel the intense urge to drink and get drunk, but no matter how strong the urge is, it can be controlled. We aren't slaves to our urges. We always have a choice.
Yeah.
We have a choice. We don't have a good choice, but we have a choice.
That scene, I think I grokked Father Paul the most this rewatch. The other thing that stuck out to me that is so subtle, but I think is overwhelmingly speaks to Father Paul's character, is the mouse story. I hadn't thought about it until watching this with my religious dad, but there's a pretty significant detail about his character. So Riley, the way he reveals to Riley who he is he tells a story about when Riley was a small boy, trapped a mouse, injured it, brought it to Father Paul, and asked him to resurrect it. And Father Paul said, come back in 3 days. And when Riley came back in 3 days, the mouse was healed and he walked off. And Father Paul, in the conversation with adult Riley, says, of course, I had to put it out of its misery and go and find a mouse that looked just like it. But look at the faith you had. Look at that encouraged your...
It's like the right thing through the wrong means. I don't know. Like, I'm doing air quotes
is
there.
not what faith is.
No.
That is hucksterism, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And it speaks to the father's broken character that creates his individual humanity. This is why we say we talk about this isn't an indictment of religion any more than it is an indictment of alcohol. It is it's
showing the extremes of both.
Like I hadn't I hadn't thought about what was latent in Father Paul's character until this third time through, and I thought about that's kind of some BS. Him faking the resurrection of a mouse for a small child because he needs the child to believe
it's
that
manipulative.
hard.
It's straight up manipulation.
It's lying. It is lying. That's not what faith is. Right?
It's as you said, it's hucksterism because he's tricking a child into believing something based on false pretenses.
Yeah. Later in the next episode, he's talking about a trip he took as a young man and standing in front of a waterfall. And he says he thought about that waterfall, and if every drop of water in that waterfall is a death. Every drop of water in that waterfall is an individual dying. And he talks about the roar of the waterfall and how it deafened everything around him. You couldn't hear the trees or the animals or the plants. And he thought about every death that's occurring on Earth, and in every death was a drop in that waterfall coming over. Then that's what it must be like for God. Every moment of every hour and of every day, a deluge of death. And if that's what it's like for God, how can he hear my whispered prayers? Right?
It's so gorgeous.
Dude. And that combined with the mouse story and the idea of bringing the mouse back from the dead, which he did for the priests in the town. Father Paul was gone, and he revealed a young Father Paul for the town, but it was a lie. The mouse is a repetition of what he does for the town to give them faith, and he lies to them and feeds them saying this is God, and it's not God. It's a monster on Earth. It's him. It's his individual character that drives the whole thing. Now I mentioned inconsequential complaints. It's him and it's Bev. Bev is first of all, the actress who's plays Bev, her performance is friggin' spectacular.
Samantha Sloyan. She's amazing. The
saying things without saying them character. So is that what you're going to do?
She does facial expressions, her body language.
Yes.
She's so good.
Essentially, every one of her lines has two meanings. Everything she says has two meanings. There is the line that she speaks.
Especially when she's talking to Sheriff as well.
Yeah. There is the line that she speaks, and there is the truth that she plays. And that is a fantastic balancing act that she does. I am just so sick of that trope. Bev is... The performance is deeply nuanced and wonderful, but Bev's character is not. And that is unlike every other character in the show who has more of a backstory and a life and all of that. Bev is there to create conflict and to drive the plot of the story.
Well, yeah,
With
here's the
one
thing, though.
insanely tiny exception, and I'll tell you that in a moment. But go say what you're going to say.
I think she still serves an important narrative function. And you pretty much just said that too. But I don't think you could remove her from the show and give those functions to Father Paul, for example, because they're too dark. Because we haven't touched on this yet, but he gets a bit of a, I don't know if you could call it a redemption, but at the end he learns the errors, the error to his ways and whatnot.
Well, I don't need that necessarily. What I want is I want to feel something other than hatred for it. Like my relationship to every other character.
You absolutely hate her.
There's nuance to my relationship with every other character except her. She is one-dimensional, you know, and it didn't need to be that way. If you, the thing I want to say is the one exception that I think is brilliant is we're getting to the last two episodes. Another complaint is that episode 6 probably didn't need to happen. However, in episode 7, there's a massacre in the church. Everyone turns into vampires. And Bev hides in the back.
In the vestibule. Yeah, in the vestibule. She
hides. So good. Yeah.
She's scared.
And I wanted more of that. Like, that is nuance. But that's the only nuance that you really get with Bev in the story. Is I just wanted more of... She poisons the pastor. She poisons the dog. These are extremely important events in the story. Why did she poison the pastor? Is it because she needed
that's
proof?
Not very clear.
Yeah. Because she thought he was an invader,
and that's
whatever it may be.
That's never confronted. That's never brought up. Like it's never.
Well, I think if I had to suss it out, she needed proof of miracles, and if the father could rise, then she knew it was a miracle. Yeah. So she poisoned him. Right. And he rose, and then she was moved by the miracles of what she was actually seeing. What made her this way? Does she? Why? How does a person like that believe that they're good?
Well, it's fanatical religion. Well, I do love one of my favorite little nuances with Bev, and I'm not even sure if you can call them nuance, but right at the very end, as the sun is coming up, everybody is resigned to their fate. They accept it. She spends her last moments digging, trying to cover herself in dirt. I forgot about that
one. That's the other one. Digging to hell. I
really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that. Like she's still hanging on to the very end.
Yeah, it's not that Flanagan didn't come up with satisfying moments for the character. Her hiding in the back of the church and her trying to dig to hell are satisfying conclusions for that character. I'm just tired of that trope. Like we said, that's the lady in the mist that casts people out into the darkness. It's maybe you need it in a story like this, but I'm not. That's why I'm saying don't take away. Just blur it up a little bit. Make her a little more blurry instead of so distinctly that.
I do love the scene where Annie, Riley's mom, confronts her and gives her the whole "God doesn't love you more than anyone else" speech.
That Annie is such a badass.
It gets to her. Samantha Sloyan has this subtlety with her face that just it drops, but not completely. You can tell it's really getting on.
Murders are happening, and she's like. It's funny. The climax, that episode, is the most Buffy of all of the episodes. Once everyone's a vampire, it doesn't become Buffy. But like the fact that there are humorous moments in the midst of horror is so Buffy. Yeah. Right? That moment of God doesn't love you, and she goes, "Wow, I don't know why we have to be so mean." In the midst of all this murder and mayhem, is very Buffy.
And I just love how she keeps digging. She's just like, why does that bother you so much? And she talks about Riley and Joe, I think. And but on the topic of Buffy, okay?
Sure.
I am convinced Mike Flanagan is a Buffy fan, and if I am wrong, I will eat my own head. I am positive, and I think there are a lot of homages to Buffy in this show.
Okay.
Not plagiarism, not ripoffs, homages. Okay, Riley's name is Riley Flynn. Riley Flynn. Okay,
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Okay. Riley's death scene on the boat. It's amends, but he lets the sun come up. I mean.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Right. And also in the final midnight mass when they're Aaron and Dr. Sarah Gunning and Mildred are sitting there and Father Paul's giving his big speech. They're almost sitting there like in graduation day going like, oh my God, he's going to do the whole speech. Like,
yeah.
And I'm sure there's more, but I'm positive he's a Buffy fan.
Yeah, Riley Finn and Riley Flynn are
that's way too close. And this delves into a lot of themes that Buffy plays with too. Forgiveness, guilt.
Well, I think that they're both very thematically driven, and they're both so related to horror that even if they're
both character-driven pieces.
Yeah, if they weren't intended to be homage, there would be a ton of overlap. From two thoughtful creators.
Yeah,
but that's 3 through 5. You want to take us to 6 and 7?
Yeah. Well, can I just quickly say about the final AA meeting, the meeting as Father Paul calls it? You sort of touched on it, but like he's in that scene, he has this very villainous air about him. And then, we start digging into Riley's guilt, and, we talk about how Father Paul doesn't feel guilt for killing Joe, and Riley's jealous. And then Father Paul talks about courage and having the courage to let go and to forgive oneself. And he has completely different motives, but I think in that moment, the conversation really got through to Riley. He actually asks him, do you feel at peace? And Riley says yes. And I think it was in that moment Riley decided what he was going to do. And that's why he was at peace. He had found his purpose. He had not given himself over to a higher power, but a higher purpose. He had given himself over to a higher version of himself.
And again, I love that, getting back to the conversation he and Aaron had, he made his death have purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. And on the topic of his death too, is we get lots there's lots of flashes to the boat scene throughout the series, and Riley talked about it's a dream that he has where he's on this boat, and then the sun comes up, and I just sort of love the idea. Like he even says, I'm not making it off this island, but you are. Like it's almost like he knew what was going to happen. Deep down, he knew it. And I love you, Mike Flanagan, so much. Anyway, sorry. I just had to,
No, good stuff.
Okay, well, so the ending, the last two books, is it Acts of the Apostles, I think, and Revelations.
So,
according to
episode 5, Acts of the Apostles, I would call the table setting episode. Or no, episode 6, Acts of the Apostles.
Yep.
Is the table setting episode for episode 7. And I think it suffers from table setting issues. But go ahead.
Well, according to IMDb, a fervent Bev calls for faith on the night of Easter Vigil, and Sarah reveals the results of a troubling experiment along with a sobering theory. That's one thing I do love, is that the show also tries to offer a scientific, realistic explanation as to what is going on. All sides are represented here, and I love that. I think that's really, really cool.
The only thing I struggle with is we already know, right?
Yes,
there are a number of scenes where characters have long explanations to each other about what's going on,
right?
And we already know. And here, the biggest thing that episode 6 suffers from is how unbelievably compelling the end of episode 5 is. Mm-hmm. Like I said, the end of episode 5 is something that I will remember on my deathbed. It is a moment, a pinnacle moment in my life of fiction, right? There's the end of a river runs through it. There's
And
live for me. The Buffy says like all of the I have been and always shall be your friend. Like there are pinnacle emotional moments in fiction for me, and that's one of them. And then you have people talking about science in episode 6.
That's fair.
When
that's fair, yeah.
5 felt like it lit a fuse. Like it's like, okay, the thing's about to explode, and there are so many moments in 5 or in 6 that do not respect the gravity of that tone that was established with the end of 5. Sorry. Sorry.
Also, I just want to touch on too. I agree. Riley's death scene, one of the most amazing scenes in all the fiction.
So good.
And that was because I watched the show before you did. A friend of mine told me to watch it, and I was like, oh my god, I have to show Ian. And that scene was one of the reasons why. And I remember sitting there watching it with you, and I'm like staring at your cab, going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And
those are some of my favorite sharing with friends is moments like, because you don't get you get a handful of those in your life, right? Those are so special. You get a handful of those, and the chance to share those with friends, like is so special. I love it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, night falls on Crockett Island as the tight-knit group of rebels take refuge where they can and forge a plan to control the chaos unfolding. That's the IMDb of Book 7, Revelations. One thing, again, I just want to talk about Father Paul for a second. Hamish Linklater, his performance, he embodies that character so freaking well. He has this warmth and butteriness to his voice that, to me, fits a priest perfectly. And he just has this calming aura about him too, like for the most part when he's doing his priest thing. So yeah, I just want to give a special mention to Hamish Linklater. But I loved at the start of this episode, he knew Riley was gone. He sensed it. He just knew.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice little detail. And then another thing that stood out to me is when Riley's dad finds the letters that Riley left everybody. He takes the letters and he goes to speak to Father Paul to ask if he knows where Riley is. And in that moment, Riley's dad sort of warms up to him and he comes around, so to speak, to Riley. But obviously it's too late, which is tragic. But he says, I could never do it with him. It's like we spoke different languages, and I did my best.
I caught that this time too.
The last, and I only noticed that this watch, but it's the last thing Riley says as he dies. And I'm like, okay, I forgive Riley's dad for everything, because that moment is fucking beautiful.
And I love Riley's note. Remember that you are dust, and from dust you will return.
And to dust you shall return. Yes, amazing. Yeah.
So 5 setup, 6 the S hits the F. Everyone goes to church, turns into vampires. The rebels burn down the church. Bev sets the whole town on fire, dooming everyone. And the sun comes up, and off we go.
Sorry. Hey, it's public domain, so I can sing it.
Yeah. I mentioned, and this is my final. I think this is my final inconsequential complaint. Sheriff's monologue. I've seen a lot of complaints.
The 9/11 one?
I've seen a lot of complaints about that monologue when looking through reviews, and I think they miss. I think there's an issue, but I think that the complaints that I've read miss what the problem is, and I think it's a problem. It's just the issue with 6, which is like shocking, powerful ending to 5. Pieces moving for 6 to get to 7, which is the climax that, people were whatever. And to have a 6 or 7 minute is what it feels like. I don't know exactly what it is. monologue about events that aren't occurring on the island that have only to do with this one character and his backstory.
That were 20 years ago.
Yeah, is such a pause button on again, which is the problem with that episode, is such a pause button on, and it sucks because Rahul Kohli is spectacular. I love the sheriff's character.
We haven't talked about Sheriff yet. He was amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
We just can't get to everything in this kind of discussion. So we're trying to hit our best
really
points.
Want to,
but that speech is a wonderful speech, and again, I love the depth adding to the characters. I just think that it occurs at the wrong point in the show.
Okay.
I think...
Yeah, if that came earlier, would have been a little more... Yeah,
so Riley gets eaten, and then Aaron is running around the island trying to find him and comes to the sheriff and tries to get the sheriff to look into the church, right? Mm-hmm. And then that occurs. Then you have the boat sequence with Riley and Aaron. Then Riley dies, and it's out of the way of that the power
it feels
of
like
that
a
sequence.
Departure.
Yeah.
It feels like a departure from the main line.
Just put it somewhere earlier in the sequence.
Yeah.
Again, none of my complaints are about taking away. It's just
and that's the thing, like, none of our complaints really matter either. They don't ruin the show.
No.
It doesn't hurt at all. These are just nitpicks. Yeah. Rahul Kohli talks about Midnight Mass a lot on Twitter. He's very, very proud of it, understandably.
Yeah, he should be. He was terrific.
Yeah. But he talks about how he took the role very seriously and wanted to do it justice. He wanted to represent the Muslim perspective fairly and as authentically as possible. And so they actually spent a lot of time with the Muslim consultant on set to make sure they got it right. And I really do appreciate that. I just wish we got to see more of that. Again, it's not something that necessarily matters. It doesn't hurt the show, but I would have liked more.
Yeah, it's funny too, even doing an American accent, Rahul Kohli is so flippin' charismatic.
Yeah, he is.
How's my night
that
gonna
guy
go,
could
Joe?
read the dictionary and I'd just be like, yeah. Keep reading, Daddy. Like,
yeah, and I don't know. Maybe it's and he's also. All right, maybe I have a little crush on Rahul Kohli. He's also like the most liquid, sexy star type of most of the cast.
Absolutely, hands down. Like Zach Gilford too, but Zach Gilford's more of like a baby cute.
He's
has
like more cute. Of the like some 41 skater boy inner darkness thing, which is perfect for the character. You know, Raul's playing a big beardy sheriff walking around in denim, and that's slightly against type, but who cares, because he does a wonderful job with it.
Absolutely.
I did get the feeling every once in a while that Mike Flanagan wrote that part because he wanted Rahul Kohli to be in the show because they're friends.
Absolutely. Well, they've worked together before too. Yeah. I think Rahul Kohli was in Hill House.
I think so. Yeah,
he was.
So I mean, to that degree, there is a small part of me that felt like the sheriff could have been better in also the sheriff's
better integrated. I think
the sheriff's inability to integrate into the community is part of the sheriff's story.
Well,
it's part of the arc of that character.
Right. See, my favorite thing about that character in general is he is really the most dignified and the most balanced and measured character in the show. Like, early in the series, that scene in the classroom where they're talking about Beverly handing out Christian doctrine to the students. I think that's what had happened, and he's very calm and measured about it. He's not. It's not against. He's not. He's never in opposition to Christianity or the faith itself. He always approaches everything with the dignity and respect for himself and his faith, but also those around him and their faith too. He really is the best person on the island. I'm just going to say it. He's the best person.
He's also he's the smartest guy in the room most of the time,
Yeah.
and yeah, he has the most balanced perspective, and to some degree,
Yeah.
not living on the island hasn't for as long as everyone else hasn't corrupted him with sort of
Right,
the
right.
the mildew
Hmm.
of spirit that has hit everyone else with the oil spill and people
Yeah.
leaving and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the sun comes up.
And then the sun comes up. Yeah. Um.
I have not
But
watched The
yeah,
Hauntings yet. I need to, and I think we should watch them together.
Okay. I've seen Hill House, but I haven't seen Blind Manor. I've been meaning to. So yeah, let's do that absolutely. Then we can talk about it here.
I don't know how we put
But
a bow
yeah,
on this one.
I don't know either. But yeah, I loved Rahul Kohli's performance. I loved just how they handled the Muslim perspective and just how he really was the most rational person out of all of them. And I think that is a fair representation of Islam, because Islam in modern culture gets a bad rap for a lot of reasons.
And I also think that the use of it, or rather the positioning of it in the story, speaks to that the show is not trying to be anti-religious.
No, it's not.
It's
Absolutely
talking
not.
about these sort of different addictions in the human spirit, and
Exactly. And
that's one of the things that his character brings to it.
Yeah, because I mean, from an academic standpoint or a non-religious standpoint, the belief is that we came up with religions as a way to explain things because we always want to know why.
Right.
We always need reasons to things, and that's why we used to attribute lightning to a god, rain to a god, flood to a god, drought to a god. Like there was always had to be a reason for it, and that's where that comes from, I think. Where do we go to next, Ian?
Would you say, where do we go from here?
Oh God, where do we go from?
Yeah, go watch it if you have not watched it, and you. I think eventually I'll be writing something for the channel about it. Jack wants to write about it as well. It's amazing. Go watch it.
Yeah,
I give it 12 stars out of 5 stars.
I give it I love it, and I want to marry it in some way, and I want to rub it all over. No, that's getting weird.
I don't think we can get any better than that. Why don't we go to the reading?
Yeah. Well, hang on. I have some final notes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't feel like we're done here. Well, I'm not done.
Oh yeah, okay.
No, sorry. We jumped ahead a bit here.
You had me at rub it all over yourself.
I wanted to talk about the final church scene where the vampire enters the church and everything. That whole erupting into chaos. That scene to me still gets my heart racing. It is so intense, so freaking scary, and the way it plays out is just yeah. Everybody starts vamping out and attacking each other. And it's very reminiscent of, like, you know, the Jonestown massacre, a religious cult drinking the
they're deliberately playing on that iconography.
And then we get that scene, as you touched on, where Bev hides in the vestibule, and I love that scene where like Erin's there, the gang are there with her, and she's like, when are you going to shoot me? So I'm going to buy you 5 more minutes, and then boom, she shoots her.
Minutes.
Like, yeah, we have 5 minutes. I'm sorry, that was just so freaking satisfying.
There are that whole sequence contains a handful of just badass moments, and
yes,
that's one of them. Riley's mom stabbing herself to give everyone time to flee is a badass moment. Wonderful stuff.
And then Father Paul gets shot in the head, but then when he wakes up, that's when his regret sets in. He realizes what's happened. He says to Mildred, he says, "Did I hurt you?" And she says, "Yes." And it's like, oh, dude. But then yeah, we get the revelation that Father Paul is Sarah's father, and that he says that he brought the angel back to Crocodile Island to save Mildred because he didn't want to he didn't want her to get old and die, and it's so tragic but also beautiful in a messed up way, which again sums up Mike Flanagan's work.
Yeah,
I don't know,
the constant juxtaposition of those two.
Yeah, and then that scene right at the end, because Sarah gets shot, and obviously they're both heartbroken. Then they scoop her up and take her to her favorite spot on the island. He rips off his collar and throws it because he says, what does he say? Because he gives her this speech about how even if he could go, like if he could going back, he would have taken off his collar just to being with Mildred and being with Sarah and be a family.
I love that she says, "I couldn't ruin 3 lives."
That's it. Yeah, I thought I had the line written down, but I don't think I do. But it's just beautiful, and yeah, they go to Sarah's favorite place on the island, where when she was a kid, he takes off his collar and what does he say? He says something. He says, "Will you forgive me?" And then she kisses him, and the sun comes up, and they burn, and it's just. Sorry, I had to talk about that.
Good.
But yeah, I guess we can move on to final comments, shall we?
Sure. I think I've covered everything I have on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you have. Sorry. One little detail I liked is when Lisa and the other little boy, they're trying to get off the island. She takes Joe's gun off his wall to protect them.
Yeah, that was interesting. I wondered where they were going to.
That was cool.
Where they were going to go with it, because it ends up she doesn't need the gun, and then the gun gets reclaimed. I loved the setup of her seeing that earlier in the Forgive Joe scene. But I just wondered what they were trying to say with it, because she doesn't do anything with the gun and it gets taken back by someone else. And maybe that's the point. I'm just unclear what the.
I just liked the idea of her taking
taking ownership of her own trauma in that sequence.
Also, it was a very deliberate choice to not have the characters use the word, vampire throughout the show. Mike Flanagan said that it would have been like winking at the audience, and we didn't need that.
Yeah, I think with these kinds of stories, my dad and I were talking about it. It's like The Walking Dead, right? You have to decide in your universe whether zombie stories existed before this one, or if this is the first one. And is this Dracula? And The Walking Dead is the first zombie story according to its own universe. This is the first vampire story.
The George Romero films don't exist. Right.
And this is the first vampire story according to its own universe.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's just something you as the viewer have to. It's neither here nor there, I realized. It doesn't mean anything as the viewer. You just have to understand that that's the universe that you're inside of, because it is a question, but ultimately I realized it's an irrelevant question to.
It is, yeah. And I can understand, like, if they said, what is a vampire? Like Dracula? Yeah. It would be like them looking at the camera and winking at us, and that cheapens the narrative, I think. But yeah, this is also my favorite use of the song Nearer My God to Thee, which is a song that was made very, very famous by James Cameron's Titanic. It was a song that played as the ship was sinking, and it's featured several times in the show. Most notably at the end, they sing it, but an instrumental version is also heard when Riley and Aaron are talking about death. And I love that song ever since Titanic, even though it's a very religious song. I just think it's a very pretty song. And so the first time I saw it, I hear dun dun, and I'm like, wait, is that nearer my god to the? And I wasn't sure because it's played at a very slow tempo, but then once I realized what it was, it just added to it. Ian, I love it so much.
The ship was sinking, and so was the town.
Yes, it's gorgeous. My favorite use of the song. And just lastly, the beach scene from book 2 is a one-er, which I think was really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's an interesting use of a one-er because most of the time it's used for like an action scene or something cool, but this, it made that scene feel like a 3D space that was alive. It just added to my immersion, and I wanted to mention it simply because one-ers are cool, but also it was just a way. I've never seen a one-er like that, to be honest.
There's a lot of CG in that shot with the birds and the cats.
I think all the seagulls are CG. I think,
and maybe that was a way of mitigating that.
Yeah. Where
you get the sense of because it has a cataclysmic feeling to it. A locusts kind of thing. Whenever nature interrupts like that, it's a harbinger of something. And so to spend a lot of time in that, as you said, in that 3-dimensional space with the locusts, or in this case, the seagulls, created a really strong sense of foreboding.
Yeah,
that maybe would have been different if you just cut.
Yeah. But yeah, and look, just again on the music, the score was written by the Newton brothers and has a very specific style that I think really uplifts it. Like, there was a heavy religious theme too, but I don't know, I'm just gonna freaking say it, man. Midnight Mass is a masterpiece. It just is. It is, and I love it. It's great, and yeah. I think we're
are you good?
I could talk for a few more hours, but we probably shouldn't do that.
We should go watch the show again. All right, let's go to the final reading. Here Is Gone by Terri Botta. This is Epilogue Part 2, and this is it. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who's followed along, and to Terri Botta. If you ever see this or listen to it, it's been a ton of fun. So, shoot us a message to say hello. It'd be nice. And I hope you enjoyed it. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his vision was blurry. But he could make out the distinct image of Dawn looking down at him. The teen's face came into better focus a few minutes later, and Dawn gasped when she saw his eyes were open. "Buffy! Buffy, Spike's awake!" Dawn called, practically leaping up from her seat on the edge of the couch and running for her sister. While he waited for Buffy to arrive on the scene, he took the opportunity to take stock of his surroundings. He was indeed on the Summers' couch, and he did appear to be badly wounded. However, he wasn't in any serious pain. In fact, he was quite numb. "Wickers work some powerful mojo on me, if they're blocking the kind of injuries Joyce said I had." Buffy came into view, hands damp from the kitchen, and William stirred inside him at the sight of her. "How shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" "Thou art more lovely and more temperate," his soul mentally whispered. No sonnets, no bloody Shakespeare." "Well, sleeping not so beauty finally awakens. Took you long enough. It's only been 5 days," the Slayer told him, coming to sit beside him on the couch. 5 bloody days, he thought, and his face must have given him away. "You heard me. 5 days. Willow was planning to go in and drag you out if you didn't wake up soon." She shrugged and went on. "I suppose a good part of that was the knockout drugs we'd given you. But still, you've been dead weight on the couch. We were considering just tossing some cushions over you and substituting you as furniture so we could watch Geraldo." He heard himself laugh and felt his lips move. Buffy's nose crinkled up at him. Buffy's nose crinkled up, and she shied a little bit. "Okay, your burns are even grosser when you try to smile," she said. He creased his brow, wondering how bad it really was if the sight of him disturbed even the Slayer. I'd bring you to a mirror, but, well, there's that no reflection thing, and I am so not wasting any film on you, just so you can see how gross and oozing you are. Acid burns and you, not a good combination. He managed a tiny shrug, and the movement dislodged something near his face. Buffy immediately moved to pick it up, and he saw it was a plastic tube that he hadn't noticed was resting against his mouth. "We've been tube feeding you," she explained, holding up the reddened plastic. He nodded that he understood. "It was easier. We didn't have to wake you, and I doubt you could have sat up to feed yourself anyway. Just think, though, you look 200% better today than you did 5 days ago." He moved his limbs experimentally and found that he could move, albeit he felt as if he was swimming through tar to do so. He tried to sit up, but Buffy put a firm hand on his chest and pushed him back down. "Oh, no. You're not getting up until you get the go-ahead from Dr. Willow," she told him. He settled back against the couch cushions and looked up at her. She looked tired and worn. But she was alive. She was alive. She smelled of sunlight and vanilla and all the scents he associated with her, and he was just so happy. "Surprised by joy, impatient as the wind," William supplied. Wordsmith now. What happened to Shakespeare? "Oh, never say that I was false of heart, though absence seemed my flame to qualify." Pansy. Bloody Sonnet 108. But you knew it, didn't you? He growled mentally and sought to shove the soul back into its box so he could look at Buffy undisturbed. It didn't work. "She walks in beauty like the night, of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes." "Ugh, shut up!" "But we always loved Byron." "Bollocks! If that wanker hadn't already been dead by the time Drew sired me, I would have made it a moral imperative to eat him." "Are you in pain?" Buffy asked suddenly, probably misreading the looks on his face as he argued with his soul. He shook his head, and a moment later he was surprised when Buffy took his hand. He gave her a confused look, but she lowered her eyes. "Willow and Giles, they told me everything," she admitted softly. "I admit it was a little hard to swallow at first, you know. The whole coming back in time to save me from dying thing seemed a bit far-fetched." He gave a mirthless laugh. Then Giles showed me a journal you'd written in, and it detailed everything, even stuff I know you couldn't know about because I never told you about it." He squeezed her hand comfortingly. They also told me you had a soul. Tara confirmed it, and you wrote about it in your journal." She paused as if gathering her thoughts, and the hand that held his tightened slightly. "This is really hard," she finally said. "I mean, Angel loved me. I know he loved me, and I loved him more than anything in the world. But I can't imagine him doing for me what you've done." She swallowed hard, and he saw the telltale glimmer of tears brimming in her eyes, and he wished desperately to be able to speak. Buff," he croaked through ruined lips. "Don't try to talk. You'll only open your burns and go all gross and oozy again. God, I wish I knew how Mom got all the blood out of everything all the time." At the memory of Joyce, she hung her head. "Mom. You really tried to save Mom." She looked at him, tears falling. "I'm sorry you couldn't." He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, using his thumb to brush a tear away, and tried to tell her everything in his heart with his eyes alone. "You did so much. I beat you down for it every chance I could. Even in the other timeline, it was obvious I used and beat you just to make myself feel better. But instead of dumping me like anyone else would, you just let me. You stayed and suffered through everything I did to you. Let me not, to the marriage of true minds, admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it was ever fixed. It is an ever-fixed mark that looks upon tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved, William recited. He sent nothing in response to the sonnet. In truth, it cut far too close to the heart of things, and he couldn't face it, not with Buffy opening to him in ways that he never thought he would ever see her open. And when we'd both been pushed way past our limits and both did horrible, unforgivable things to each other, you went to earn back your soul? You went looking for someone to give you a soul? She emphasized. Do you think Angelus would have come to get a soul for me? Angel without his soul hated me and tried to kill me and all my friends, but you... She trailed off, and he once again cursed his inability to speak. What you did for me, and for Dawn, that... She continued, then stopped again. He squeezed her hand. Look, I don't know what's going to happen now, and my guess is neither do you, she finally said. I guess it's up to us now to make a different future. Hopefully one that isn't as screwed up as the one you lived through. He gave her a nod and what he hoped was a look of encouragement. I do know that I will stop using you as my convenient punching bag, and I'll try not to automatically assume the worst of you. Anything else that happens between us will have to happen on its own. That's all I can promise you. It was more than he'd ever hoped to hear from her lips, and he almost started to cry again. Don't start crying. You'll move your jaw and crack open your burns again, and I'd kiss you on the cheek right now, but you smell really gross. He let himself laugh silently at her attempt to break the heaviness that had settled on them. I'm going to go get the others. Dawn and Willow wanted to see you right away, but I made them promise to wait in the kitchen till I had a chance to talk to you by myself. I'd better go tell them the coast is clear before they batter down the door. You up to seeing others? He nodded, and she smiled at him. Okay, I'll go get the horde. She released his hand and stood, but their fingers lingered together, pulling apart at the last possible moment as she headed to the kitchen door. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways, William began, but he cut him off with his own verse. And death shall have no dominion. Dead men naked they shall be one, with the man in the wind and the west moon. When the bones are picked clean and the clean bones gone, they shall have stars at elbow and foot. Though they go mad, they shall be sane. Though they sink through the sea, they shall rise again. Though lovers be lost, love shall not, and death shall have no dominion. There was a stunned silence across the link between them. Then William sent, I'm not familiar with that one. Dylan Thomas. He was after your time. Blighter could write circles around your pathetic Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And exactly what would you know? That if you had no use for this worthless drivel, as you so eloquently put it. He didn't answer. There was no sense in rising to his soul's bait. They were stuck with each other, after all, and he needed to maintain some semblance of his former bad self. And then Dawn was bounding in, and she was reaching out to touch part of him that wasn't injured, her hands gentle and tender. Willow and Tara followed, his Wiccas who believed in him and had given him their faith and strength. Two more who made up his little family, the ones who chose him and in turn were chosen by him to be closer to him than any other blood kin ever had been. Buffy came again at last, standing with one shoulder against the door frame, giving the others time to fuss and jostle over him. She was watching them scrabble and jockey for position next to him, and he saw her face crack into a wide smile as she laughed. Her laughter was music, and the sight of her a miracle he could not have hoped to witness. Their eyes met, and in spite of all his wounds and burns, he felt more whole than he had ever felt in all his long years. He had finally come home. And death shall have no dominion. Bloody damn right. Jack!
Mhm.
We baited it the last time, but this time it's for real.
Yeah,
The end of the reading.
Yeah, the reading is done, and I think we're going to shelve it for now. We'll see.
For now, we'll think about it. That was 47 recordings that I started over a year ago.
It's just funny because every time we say we're going to do something or we're not going to do something, we end up doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we'll see.
I recorded the final one yesterday, and I actually felt something. I felt a little like,
Okay.
So I just wanted to say thank you to Terri. I've never heard from Terri. I found Terri's story on a website.
Yeah.
I don't know if Terri knows who we are or who the channel is.
You have a standing invitation to come on the show whenever you want, though, Terri. If you stumble upon this.
Yeah, the story was posted on fanfiction.net in 2002. And I
wow.
Yeah, and I found it before season 7 aired. It was I guess she had watched season 6, and this was the response to season 6. But I really enjoyed it. If you're out there and ever hear this, I hope you felt like we did it some justice. But I think, for now, we're going to sort of rethink the fanfic section and put it on hold. Jack, what do you have coming up this week?
Well, Ian, this Saturday or Sunday morning, for those of you closer to my neck of the woods, Ian and I will be rewatching The Gift live on stream. The Gift. We got to season 5, man.
Holy cow, we're done with season 5.
I know. We get to talk about season 6 next. I'm so excited.
Sexy sad season 6.
Sexy sad. That's the best way to sum up season 6.
Sexy sad season 6.
Yeah. But then after that, we'll be joining in a hangout discussion with patrons from the $5 and up tier to talk about the episode. The stream of that discussion is free to all, both the rewatch stream and then discussion are linked down in the description. So go and click the bell notification and join us and come and hang out. As the Patreon is also linked down there. So if you'd actually like to join in the discussion about the gift, head on over to, is it patreon.com/Patch of the Nerd?
Yes, link in the description.
Yes. And come and join us. Ian, what about you, sir? What are you up to?
Well, I'm sorry, I got excited because we're still doing this thing where we're rolling the topic of the next episode in this one.
And this is completely not staged. We're doing it randomly.
We have no idea what we're going to talk about next. We're about to pick it out. And if you want to suggest things for us to talk about, leave a comment down below, or if you're watching the YouTube version, if you're listening, tweet me or Jack. I'm at Ian Nittram. Jack, what's your handle?
I am at Lack of Surprise 1. That's all one word with the number 1 at the end.
And we decided this last time we're actually going to open it up. So we added Angel After the Fall. And so we keep a list of items that we're going to select randomly from. Usually, sometimes there's going to be a thing that we decide we want to watch that we're just going to watch. But we've opened it up now where we added Buffy Season 8 and Angel After the Fall to the list.
Yep. We've also added a couple of suggestions from viewers and listeners and whatnot.
You left us some suggestions the last time. Those are now in the list.
Yep.
And some of the items on the list, like Supernatural, which, how do we talk about Supernatural? There's 14 seasons. Probably what we'll do is we'll talk about Season 1.
Friend of the show, Aaron Smith, requested the Paddington films, which is going to be interesting.
I've heard they're wonderful.
I hear they are too. I haven't seen them, but hey, if we land that, let's rock and roll.
So we've added reading. I've been asked about my opinion for Buffy season 8 for years, and I've never finished it. And I figure this is the carrot to finish it, or the stick, depending on the point of view. So, but other than that, I have been making semi-regular appearances with Ian Carlos over on the Slayer 98 podcast. This week was our discussion of one of my favorite season 1 episodes of Angel, Somnambulist, with Hawk Pyre. And the discussion that I had with Ian, Claire, and Zach actually kind of unlocked what my take is going to be with Reprise. If you're looking for a preview of the next episode guide, links to that podcast are in the description. Jack, shall we?
Let's do it, Ian. I'm ready.
I'm not. I'm nervous. Okay.
so am I. But...
There are 27 items on the list.
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking the random number now. It is 26. Yellow Jackets.
Oh! Yellow Jackets is going to be an interesting one. I only put that one on the list like yesterday too. That's...
All right. Now, it's not next week. It's whenever we finish Yellow Jackets is when we're talking about Yellow Jackets in the next podcast episode.
From memory, so there's only one season. I mean, we're only doing one season per
conversation
episode. Conversation. But I'm pretty sure it's like 12 episodes or something, so not too long. But yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the reasons why we're not weekly. Is because it's going to take what it takes to watch all the things.
It's kind of another horror-y one, not like straight up horror, but it's kind of like a scary version of Lost in a way. I don't know, but yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, we're looking forward to it. I put the podcast of the nerds shirts, pillows, and all of that stuff back up on the Teespring store. That's linked in the description. Some of them are...
Get some swag.
I need to get some myself, actually, because...
Me too. We're going to.
Yeah. Liz sent us 2 designs that are just friggin' spectacular. And so we put the design on a pair of yoga pants. And there's you on the back, and then there's me on the front, and it just happens that the way Liz drew me, I'm like, I have my tongue out looking for a drink.
Yeah, like.
So we're just gonna move on. If you want to buy a pair of yoga pants or a shirt,
I want a pair of yoga pants.
Yeah, I want a pair of yoga pants. Links down in the description. It supports the show. Let's Jack and I eat. Incredibly helpful. Mm-hmm. If you'd like to join the Patreon discussion down there as well, you already know our Twitter handles. I'm youtube.com/passionofthenerd. Well, Jack and I both are, and that's it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, friends. We'll see you next time with Yellow Jackets.
Thank you, my friends. Bye.